Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Ladies and gentlemen, send us your comments, send us your greetings, tell us where you are viewing from, please, and please send in your comments and questions on this lovely night, the 71st broadcast of Good Evening Britain. I hope you're well wherever you're watching in the United Kingdom or throughout the world. Now, we have a guest coming up at 7:30. It's the ever popular and hardworking Ash, that Preston journalist, a man who is putting out several YouTube videos every single day on British politics, and we're going to be speaking to him tonight about exactly what's on his mind and what's in the British political mind. And that was Ash there. You got a fleeting glimpse of him. Let's put him up for a little while more just so that you can be advised. Our guest this week, the brilliant Ash, that Preston journalist, not to be missed. Now, Ash will be coming up at 7:30 for 20 minutes, and we're looking forward to speaking to him then. Now, if you're watching on TikTok, you won't see the interview because it's only being conducted on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. But if you're watching on TikTok, please tell us what you think of the current set of circumstances at the moment. We love to hear from you all. Now, tonight we've got a busting Indy myth that's going to be coming up. We're going to be looking at whether or not the Scottish nationalists are right to complain that we're not in a union of equals, as if they'd be happy if we were in a union of equals. Okay, so we're going to be looking at that and drilling down on what exactly they're getting at there and responding very positively with our frame, which is very much that we are in a union which is greater than the sum of our parts. We are in a union of joint endeavour, a union of purpose, a union of affinity. That's what the Great British Union is all about. But we'll be developing that further. Let's say hello to some people who have come in tonight. And Derek was bang on the button with the first one. Good evening, Alistair and fellow Unionists. Hope everyone's doing well. I did enjoy last week's guest, Liz. It was a brilliant show. Wasn't it just? Lots of people have been saying that Liz was great last week, talking about the debanking debacle. We might mention that as well when we speak with Ash at the bottom of the hour. Debbie says, good evening from Cummonston. Well done last week on pronouncing it correctly. Good, that's 2 weeks in a row. Brilliant. Hello to Catherine and to Rita and to Stuart from Elgin and Derek from Armadale. And Adam is not long home from Ireland, and he gives us his best wishes there in Irish Gaelic. Hopefully you can tell us what that means, Adam. It looks interesting. And Christopher from Bonnie Falkirk. Folks, please do feel free to share the broadcast as well. That's the way that we get out. If you're watching on Twitter, please retweet or repost now, because goodness me, Elon Musk has changed it altogether and he doesn't seem to want to call it Twitter anymore. He wants to call it X, which has to be the oddest rebranding of a platform ever. And so we're not allowed to retweet anymore. We have to repost. Have you noticed the change in the language? He's getting rid of all the old Twitter language. I don't know what his long-term plan on that is, but I'd much preferred the old logo for a start anyway. Adam says that his Irish Daya, I'm not going to try to pronounce that because I wouldn't want to get this so wrong, says it's a way of saying hello to you. And hello back, Adam. Good. Well, what do we think about Nicola Sturgeon and the thousands and thousands of pounds which they spent on frivolities, taxpayers' money as well? That's all being released by the Daily Record this week, which is makes extremely interesting reading. And, you know, they used to complain, quite rightly, about some of the expenditures of the MPs. Remember, that was a big thing 2 or 3 years ago. Well, what about the expenditures of the MSPs, and in particular the Scottish executive, and their dilly-dallying around the world? And buying books as well, buying books at the airport and putting that on expenses. I could not believe that. Imagine doing that. Unbelievable. Hello to British legends. Indeed, they're a corrupted SNP cult, and hopefully they're going to be on the way out, because this is one of the things that the Rutherglen and Hamilton by-election is going to be telling us exactly what the situation is going to be for next year. Because if Labour fail to win Rutherglen, which is one of their target seats, if they fail to win that at the by-election, then we really have to wonder whether they're going to make an impact Britain-wide. So it's going to be an extremely interesting by-election. People are saying it's probably going to be the 5th of October. If it's not the 5th, it'll be the 12th. But they're not going to make a decision until September, when the British Parliament reconvenes, because apparently they're off for August, which always strikes me as very odd, because, like, who's in charge now? Like, at least you can imagine all the MPs sitting about Westminster, like, somebody's in charge, right? But now they all just go on holiday, so are we just all left to our own devices? Is the country just meant to all just say, you know, the teacher's gone, let's all just, like, have a laugh? Who knows? Anyway, somehow the country manages just to continue as normal. You know, it's amazing how we do that, isn't it? Sometimes you wonder how much we actually need a government. Maybe we don't need a government 365 days a year. Maybe we only need a government like in the old days, whenever the king decided to call a parliament and it would convene. I'm thinking of James VI here because I've been reading about him a lot. They would decide, I'll convene a parliament. And so he'd basically just send a horseman around all his best buddies to tell them, meet in Edinburgh on a certain date. And the nobility would turn up and they'd make one or two decisions. They'd argue about stuff. They'd plot against the people that they didn't like. But the country kept running. Like, all the peasantry kept raising chickens and cattle and all that sort of stuff. Everything seemed to just keep going on, even though there wasn't actually a government deciding most of the time. It's really quite strange. Of course, a lot of lawlessness as well as a consequence of that. Oh my, Scotland in those years. Incredible stuff. Anyway, Adam says Labour is going to win Rutherglen. You could well be right, Adam. Alan Dawes says good evening, and Catherine goes, so it's the banks and council. So yes, the reason I mentioned James VI there was because I wrote an article yesterday which we put on our, drumroll please, on our Substack. Now, our Substack is our new platform, and I want to just say a few words about Substack so that you can understand what this is all about. Now, Substack is a relatively new platform which enables content to be monetized. So if you are a content creator, such as A Force for Good, then you can, instead of just putting your articles up on your website and people reading them and forgetting about them and not really appreciating perhaps the work that went into them, you can put them up on Substack, and they're only available to people who are actually paying a small monthly fee. And what this does is it's a way of bringing in an income to an organization, specifically from people who want to give you that support because they support the work that you are doing. And so we decided that we would get on Substack and put a proportion of our written work up there, which is what we started to do on Monday. Okay, and so yesterday we put up an article which will just show there, which was about an On This Day in British History article. Yesterday was the Battle of the Armada in the English Channel, and so I did some research to see how that affected Scotland, and we put up an article on it, and there it is: Scotland and the Spanish Armada. James VI closed the ports, forcing the destruction of the Spanish Armada around the Scottish coast. And to write that, took me like a couple of hours. So I thought, well, I'll put that up on Substack. And it's available there for people who are union supporters. Okay, this is the big thing. If you're a union supporter, that is, if you're donating to us monthly already, then you will get free access to Substack. All you need to do is just send us an email, say, Alistair, can you give us free access to Substack? And we'll let you see all these articles that are behind that paywall. So that's a big thing. If you're a union supporter, please do, as soon as possible, please do contact us, and we will give you a free Substack subscription. So it's a way of getting people really to become union supporters, ideally. And then once they're a union supporter, they get access to articles that are behind the paywall. If you don't want to become a union supporter, but you still want to read the articles behind the paywall, then that's fine. You can do so via Substack. But it's just a way of enabling us to get some extra income coming in, because as you know, and as I've said before, our crowdfunder only took us up to June, and so we're basically living by the skin of our teeth between now and the next crowdfunder, which will be Christmas. So anything that we can do to bring in some funds, and Substack is one of these ways that potentially we could do so, and over time it might work out very well. Within 2 or 3 years we could have a very healthy Substack. In fact, I'm saying right now we will have a very healthy Substack subscriber base. So definitely another castle on the internet that we are building in order to get our message out to the world. So very excited about Substack. So let's put out the link as well for Substack across all our platforms, and click on it, and basically just click on the orange coloured banner at the top right of the page and follow the instructions, and you can choose your subscription. You can have a free subscription, which means that you'll get occasional free articles, or you can choose the monthly subscription, which means you'll get all the articles behind the paywall, or you can choose an annual subscription, which is cheaper than a monthly subscription, or you can choose to become what we're calling a founding member for a one-off lifetime payment. Good stuff. Good stuff. Other articles that we put out there behind the paywall. What is Britain and what is British? That's one of our sort of foundational articles for people. And yeah, good. So just a reminder that we will be that Richard on TikTok says keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Richard. Nadia Brown says, why don't you ask Westminster for money? Oh, why don't we at the Force for Good ask Westminster for money? Do you know what? That's a very good idea. Perhaps they could give us the thousands of pounds that they gave the Scottish National Party to buy all the books at the airport, to buy the nail varnish, to buy the yoga lessons. You know, these were all paid by Westminster, or rather by you and I, Nadia, so perhaps we could ask Westminster for that and see if they'd give it to us. After all, they've really got more reason to give us the money because we're trying to keep the United Kingdom together, whereas the Scottish National Party, who are in receipt of our British taxpayers' money, are actually trying to destroy Britain. What an irony that is. Isn't that ironic? Do you think that's ironic, Nadia? Because I certainly do. So maybe we'll take you up on that and we'll see if they've got any pennies for us. So any other... I'm trying to find comments on TikTok that are capable of being read out. Are you Les McEwen? Well, I'm not. But I know who you're meaning, the lead singer of the Bay City Rollers. Did some great music, the Bay City Rollers. Richard says, good man, thank you, sir. Connolly says that the English used to kill Scots people for wearing tartan. I don't think that they did. I think what you're confusing is that after the Jacobite War in 1745, there was a period that it was considered to be essentially a military dress, and so they outlawed it in that sense. But it wasn't long before all that settled down, as it were, and it became, of course, a great Scottish and British dress, which especially was popularised by Sir Walter Scott and also by King George IV when he came to Scotland and gave it the official establishment approval. But no, you wouldn't get killed just because you're wearing a Bay City Rollers t-shirt back in 1745. In fact, they wouldn't even have heard of the band back then, would they have? So I'm just trying to see anything more here. No, please do continue to send in your comments on TikTok, and to the extent that I can, I will answer them. Now, we're going now to bust an Indy myth, right? And this is one that it's going to take a little bit of time, 5 minutes, just to really get into this one, because where's our busting Indy myths banner? Let's get that one up. Now, Derek says, wouldn't it be great if Westminster did support AFFG? Yes, it certainly would. Because, as Christopher says, we are articulating the very things that the UK government should be articulating. Maybe we should approach the Culture Secretary. Maybe we absolutely should, Christopher. At least to bring the Culture Secretary, at least to bring our work to his attention. Okay, now, where are we here? Busting Indy Myths, here we are. Now, in this Busting Indy Myths, we're going to address the oft-heard Indy myth. From the SNP that the UK is not a union of equals, okay? In this Busting Indy Myth number 26, we're going to address the SNP claim that the union is not a union of equals. Now, this is a strange complaint to hear from the Scottish National Party, because the immediate implication is that somehow they'd be happy if it were a union of equals. And so we then have to ask, well, why are they not doing anything to help make it a union of equals? Or are they just happy to complain about it not being a union of equals? And would they be happy if it were a union of equals? Of course they wouldn't be happy if it were a union of equals. They don't even want such a thing in the first place. So it is a little bit of a cheek for them to complain that we're apparently not a union of equals when they don't even want us to be a union of equals in the first place, right? So there's that. There's that. However, they do put it about a lot, and it does have a certain traction, because we all want to think that Scotland is England's equal, right? Whatever that's meant to mean. And let's look at that for a moment. But firstly, what got them coming up with this phrase? What got them started on this phrase? And it was born out of their frustration that the SNP was winning elections on an alleged mandate to have a referendum, but was not getting allowed to have a referendum. In other words, it was born of their inability to understand what devolution is and what the limits of devolution within a United Kingdom are. Because its limits, the limits of devolution, do require that the SNP is not able to get its way all the time, because there happen to be other countries and other people in this United Kingdom whose interests have to be considered. Okay, but nevertheless, the SNP continued to think that devolution was all about just allowing the SNP to get its way all the time, which is not about at all. And when they found out that the SNP couldn't get its way all the time, then they started saying that we're not in a union of equals, because we can't get our way all the time. In other words, they didn't understand even the union that they were in or the nature of devolution. So at the root of this complaint that we're not a union of equals is an inability or unwillingness to understand the constitutional point and limits of devolution. That's it, basically. An unwillingness or inability to understand that Holyrood is a devolved arm of the British Parliament, and it sits within the overall British state, whose central parliament at Westminster is a parliament for all parts of the United Kingdom, and has a duty and responsibility to keep the United Kingdom together on behalf of all parts of the United Kingdom, and on behalf of all parts of the United Kingdom and all people that want it to be kept together. That's the job of Westminster. And so long as we're within a United Kingdom, then it's Westminster's right in order to do that. But no, they somehow believe that it's all about simply just allowing the SNP to get whatever it wants because it happens to have a majority of seats or votes at a Scottish or British election. Well, no, it's not about that at all. Devolution is about strengthening the union, allegedly, and about bringing government closer to the people. That was what it was established to do, all within the context of a United Kingdom. We need to get back to understanding what devolution was intended to be, rightly or wrongly. So the complaint that the UK is not a union of equals is born of a complete misunderstanding of what devolution is. That's the first thing that we need to look at. But the second thing we need to look at is like what's meant by that anyway? Because what do you mean when you talk about equal? What are you meaning here? You know, and that's important because otherwise, if we don't understand what we're meaning about things, then we don't know what we're agreeing with or what we're against. And so our answers can be misrepresented to imply things that we were not considering at the time. I mean, when we talk about equality between Scotland and England, are we speaking about Scotland as a country being equal to England as a country? In which case, what are we comparing in Scotland versus England? And what measurements are we using? Are we comparing the population, the relative resources available, the size of the economy? Because clearly in those regards we might be equal in some respects and unequal in others. For example, some people would say that there was inequality between Scotland and England regarding our oil resources, Scotland having more oil resources than England. That's an inequality. So you could say Scotland and England are not equal in that because Scotland's actually got more. That's one way of thinking about it, isn't it? Or are you talking about parliaments being equal? Are you talking about Holyrood being equal with Westminster? Because if you're thinking that's the case, then you're completely wrong. There is no equality there. And there never was meant to be. Or are you talking about the unequal union in the sense that Scotland is advantaged in the union by having two parliaments, by having Holyrood and Westminster in a way that is unfair, some might say, to the English? Are you talking about that, Mr. SNP? Are you talking about that constitutional unfairness? No, I don't think you are. Okay. So what are you actually talking about when you talk about equal? But what we hear when you're talking about Scotland is not in a union of equals. What we're hearing is that you just don't like the fact that Scotland's not getting its way all the time. That's what we're hearing over all the noise. And in response to that, we try to get back to basics. And rather than addressing your particular matter, which we don't necessarily even agree with the basic terms that we might each be using, instead of getting drawn down into that, we prefer simply to state our frame. And our frame is that we are in a union. And what is the point of the union? The point of the union, or any union, is to join together so that we may enjoy the benefits of association which accrue from working together, in order that we can become greater than the sum of our parts, so that we can achieve benefits and advantages and consequences which cannot be achieved by working apart or working alone, so that together we can become stronger, more secure and more successful. And that's our idea of what a union represents. And to that end, we encourage people to put personal interests aside and concentrate on the common good. And that's the union ideal that we campaign for. So we're not going to get wrapped up in the SNP definitions of what constitutes equal and unequal between Scotland and England. We're simply going to state our frame, which is that we're in a union which enables the sum of our parts to be greater than what we are on our own. Being greater than the sum of our parts. That's our frame. That's the unionist frame. That's the frame upon which we campaign. And you know what? I was looking this up today. There's a word for that. It's called synergy. And the definition of synergy is the combined power of a group of things when they are working together that is greater than the total power achieved by each working separately. That's our ideal. Union synergy. And just to conclude, you know, and I mentioned this at the start, the Scottish nationalists, when they complain about there not being a union of equals, they're not approaching this in good faith, because they're not coming to the table believing in a union in the first place. And if they truly believed in a union of equals, they'd be trying to make it work instead of constantly campaigning against it. And so for them, it's just a rhetorical device, another rhetorical device to try to attack unionists, to try to put us on the back foot, and to try to make us somehow feel ashamed of what they're claiming are some kind of foundational principles of the United Kingdom. So they're only using the union of equals phrase as a rhetorical device to break up the UK. So a straw man argument that they're building up to break down. So let's conclude. The union ideal, okay, is that the union's about working together, about one for all and all for one. So that ultimately, in the Latin phrase, vis unita fortior, in union, strength is yet stronger. And that's the motto of the Union Bridge, which connects Scotland and England over the Tweed. A union of teams working together for the greater good, a union of joint endeavour, a union of purpose, a union of progress based on a union of affinity. Okay, that's our ideal. And we'd love to be able to articulate that to those SNP MPs and MSPs who constantly complain about somehow not being involved in a union of equals. So I'd say to them, join with us and let's pool our strengths and resources to make life better for everyone throughout our islands. And here endeth Busting Indy Myths, part 26. Thanks for listening, folks. Now, Ash is in the house, and we are just about to bring up Ash. Ash, let me just see. We're going to bring you in. Folks, please do give a big welcome to Ash, that Preston journalist.
Evening, Alistair. Evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. How are we coming through at your end?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant stuff. Well, you know, as I said to our readers earlier, you're extremely busy on the internet every day knocking out these videos. And today you were talking about Les Anderson. Have you made a video yet about Nicola Sturgeon and her team and their expenses that are being revealed? Unbelievable expenses. Have you had anything to say about that yet?
Yeah, I made a brief one that went out tonight. So when Alistair's show, obviously after 8 o'clock finishes, you can take a look at that if you wish to, but not as in depth as I'd like to go. So it was only quite a quick video, but I will do a more in depth one. But just reading it, because I haven't really had time to read it properly, to be honest with you. But even just scanning through the articles. And I think there's a lot more to come, by the way, as well from the record. I think they're going to drip feed this and keep it running. Just some of the things that they've wasted £14.2 million on is curling, crazy golf, trips to the zoo, Play-Doh of all things, unbelievable. Yoga classes, 6 copies of one of the shortest books in the world, which is The Greatest Speeches of Nicola Sturgeon. Food, drinks, parties, luxury stays at the Glen Eagles Hotel, of course, which, as everyone knows, is an exclusive hotel and not cheap. £10,000 alone on airport flight upgrades, and airport VIP lounges. That's not even including the price of the flight in the first place. This woman has been living a fantastic life on our pound for a long time. And thankfully, it looks like, anyway, that everything's coming crashing down around her now because she's finally being caught out for the crook that she is.
Why don't you tell us what you really think there, Ash? That's right. More than £100, the Daily Record reported, that was spent on 6 copies of Women Hold Up Half the Sky, which, for some reason, is the title that Nicola Sturgeon gave to her book of collected speeches. Although I actually bought the book and I opened it up and it was actually a blank notebook inside. No, I can assure you I did not actually buy the book. But
Thank God.
yes, collected speeches. I mean, seriously, what speeches has she made that are going to like go down in history as something? I mean, that's worthy of repeating in like 100 years. I can't recall that she's ever addressed a parliament or a stadium or something with some sort of meaningful national address that's not just simply a partisan political message full of, just full of her point of view on things. It's not like she's standing up there giving some great Churchillian address to the nation in its time of trouble. I mean, literally, there's nothing that she's said that's going to be worthy of even rereading the next day, let alone publishing in a book. But was that not the publishers that actually went out of business? One of these publishers...
Yeah, either that or it's in administration, one or the other, yeah. It's about to go out of business, I think, yeah. And I believe, unsurprisingly, that some money from the Scottish National Investment Bank, which is a joke in itself, taxpayers' money actually went towards that publisher and, I suppose by extension, towards the making of that ridiculous book as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, I'm just looking at the other books that were bought here. £6.29 was spent on a book called Why Does Everything Always Go Wrong? Which seems very pertinent. And I do hope that they learned something from that. £2.99 on a book called I'm Not Good Enough. And £21.52 on The Inmates Are Running the Asylum, which is that could be actually the history of the SNP, I think, that one. And then £2.99 on Are You Strong Enough to Keep Your Temper? And
there was another one as well. There's one. Wasn't the one called How to Govern a Country or something like that as well?
There was something like that. There was one. The 5 dysfunctions of a team, and there was one 1999 spent on a book on irritable bowel syndrome. I don't know who that one would be for, but I just can't believe that they would not know correctly not to do that. I mean, you just don't. If you want sitting at an airport, you're not going to spend and you see a book and you think, oh, I'll buy that for £6.29. You're going to do it on your own money. You're not going to go, oh, I'll let the British taxpayers pay for this one. I wouldn't have thought you would, unless you're just a blooming greedy fool, really.
She's exactly that. This highlights better than anything the narcissism, the ego on this woman who believed she was completely untouchable. Nobody was going to vote against her. Nobody was going to stand against her. And for a time, she was probably not too far from the truth. But things like this, as Westminster's found out in the past, of course, with the expenses scandal there, and this is no different to that, people do not like having their taxpayers' money being splurged all over the place on luxuries at a time when a lot of people are struggling to pay their bills, they're struggling to drive the cars, and councils and devolved administrations are making it even harder for people at the moment to make a living. So I think it really highlights the personality of the woman. She's really letting it, and she's got another memoir coming out as well. It's what she's calling a highly personal memoir. Like this woman truly believes she will go down as a Churchillian type of figure, when I think she's more of a Richard, Duke of Gloucester, if you remember the man who locked the princes in the Tower a long time ago. Because let's face it, she only got where she was by stabbing people in the back. She stabbed Salmond in the back and then tried to get him sent to prison. And that's the only reason she got where she was. She saw Salmond was weak, she targeted him, she went for him, she got the job.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that's how all these politicians get to the top job as well, by the way, not just Nicola Sturgeon. They all stab each other in the back. That's why they're all such paranoid wrecks, I think.
Well, I think there's one man that would disagree with you on that, and that's Humza Yousaf, who truly believes that he is an inspiration to
He's the chosen one.
To many young people today for being able to rise to the dizzy heights of first ministerialship. And his advice to people who didn't like or who don't think that he's worthy of it is to tell everybody to quote-unquote F off. And this seems to be a new thing among politicians, at least in the last 48 hours, of the F word. But there's an article here which I'll just bring up. And this was just pointed out to me recently. Humza Yousaf has X-rated message for... let me bring it in. There you go. Humza Yousaf has X-rated message for bigots. Okay, bigots is people who don't support Humza Yousaf, as he urges Scots to ignore those who dismiss them. And let's just scroll down. Humza Yousaf has urged people to tell bigots who discriminate against them, F you. The First Minister admitted it was not First Ministerial language and an uncomfortable message. He was speaking at the recording of a party political podcast with a so-called comedian at the Edinburgh Fringe. I say so-called comedian. I've seen a few comedians at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I mean, they're not that funny. And especially if they're SNP supporting comedians, then they're not actually even comedians. They're just like court jesters for the system. He said he hoped to be an inspiration for other people from diverse backgrounds, whatever that's meant to mean. The 38-year-old became the first SNP leader of South Asian descent. He said at the Gilded Balloon Teviot on Tuesday that he'd been written off throughout his career. Oh, aye, that's interesting to know. It's
unbelievable how he can say that, isn't it? He's failed his way to the top job. He's never done a good job at anything. Let's face it, this is not a racist thing to say. He is a token, diverse candidate. They put him there because they wanted to look diverse. He would never have got there off his own back. And I doubt that many of the main parties would have touched him because he's so inept and so incompetent at anything that he's ever done. And when he talks about diversity, all he can think of is playing the race card and, oh, I've got different coloured skin to you, so it's been harder for me. When it was pointed out in this very same article that you're quoting here, it's pointed out to him that not just him, but also Anna Sawar both attended the private Hutchison's Grammar School in Scotland. And Humza Yousaf said in reply to that, yeah, we both come with a bit of privilege. We have to recognise that, and I think it's important that we recognise that. I mean, what is he talking about? He's probably got a lot more privilege than a lot of people in Scotland, who, and all over the UK, to be fair, who never had the opportunity to attend private schools like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he's still going on about his race thing here, because I've spent most of my political life, he says, being told by mainly middle-aged white conservatives. Why do you have to bring in the race thing that they're white? Okay, so
they're always conservatives, aren't they?
Yes. Yes, and to be quite frank with you, I can absolutely guarantee you that no middle-aged white conservative went up to him and told him that he's not smart and out of his depth,
no,
quote unquote.
No, definitely not.
Mr. Yousaf, you're not smart and you're out of your depth. There, you absolutely are, sir. I can see that. I can see that happening. Essentially saying that you don't belong in the political realm. Yeah. Well,
I don't think this is the worst thing in the world. You know, I think this just shows the levels now of desperation. If we look at what's been happening in the last few weeks, I don't think he could be much weaker than he is now. We've got the Rutherglen by-election coming up, which of course you were talking about before, which I fully expect Labour to win. I don't think Humza Yousaf has a single shot in that, and he's going to lose it, and lose it badly. He's also got now Angus MacNeil, who's been suspended from the party for criticising the leadership. And Angus MacNeil is lobbing grenades in left, right and centre as well. And then he's got Kate Forbes coming out now and saying that the Green coalition with the SNP should be voted on at the party conference, as well as a senior figure like Fergus Ewing saying that the Green coalition deal should be scrapped altogether. Things couldn't be going any worse. A recent poll had him at 16%.
Yeah, Yeah, that's right. We'll see what happens in the Rutherglen event, and if it's on the 5th of October, what that means is that basically just about a week later, I think it's on the within a week, the SNP conference actually begins. So the hope is that they'll lose, and that will give them a massive headache for the actual conference when the conference begins a week later. Having said that, I'm quite happy for him to stay in power as long as he possibly can.
Yeah, definitely for the time being. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly until the next general election, and ideally beyond that, because for obvious reasons, that if somebody more photogenic comes in, then there'll be the media darling. And obviously, one's thinking of Kate Forbes. If they come in and charm the media, and then people go, "Oh, she's a nice wee lassie. I'll vote for her," or something like that, without really realising what they're voting for.
I think she's been
So
quite
happy.
Kate Forbes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
she's taken a step back, hasn't she? She's sitting in the wings. She's lobbing the odd grenade now and again, basically keeping her mouth shut. She will speak about cost of living crisis, etc. But she's learned what nobody else inside the party seems to have learned, apart from maybe Fergus Ewing, that to talk about independence at the moment is a toxic subject, and it's not going to do you any favours with the electorate. Even I'm not all, but a big percentage of SNP voters now do not want a referendum in the next 5 years. They can see that without the UK, their lives would be considerably worse, and they'd be considerably worse off as well if they weren't in this union at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who say, "Oh, Scotland's going to be far better off, so-called independent," I don't believe that's based in any kind of even real understanding of what the global economic situation is at the moment, and especially the plans that the Scottish nationalists have for us going forward with energy, for example, which is basically to cut Scotland's energy off, to refuse to even look for more fuel, to basically shut down our so-called fossil fuel industry. I mean, that's literally the plan at the moment for the SNP Greens, and that's I mean, also the Tories and Labour are not ideal on that as well. They're very reluctant to develop what we call energy independence, energy security for the United Kingdom. But at least Rishi Sunak and others are beginning to realise the importance of energy security, whereas the Scottish nationalists are still trapped in the "we don't want anything to do with fossil fuels, we're somehow going to magic it out of the sun and out of the wind."
Madness. Here's a question for you, Alistair. When's the last time you heard the SNP announce a policy? Apart from the ridiculous white paper, which is exactly the same as what Salmond brought out years ago and Sturgeon brought out after that, I can't think of a single policy recently that the SNP have even tried to announce. The only policies that have come out of Scotland recently is the disastrous deposit return scheme, which is a complete disaster. And now we've got Harvey, who's trying to take your boiler away and ban God knows how many oil boilers as well in the Highlands, etc., who don't have gas. The tail is well and truly wagging the dog. Yousaf isn't in charge. He's a figurehead for the Greens. That's the way I see it, at least.
Yes, I think so. Somebody just making a comment here on TikTok that we wouldn't have been able to watch this programme without Scotland having invented the telephone. I think what the gentleman is referring to there is Alexander Graham Bell inventing the telephone. Well, of course, all these great achievements, well, he actually did it when he was in Canada, but nevertheless, he was from Edinburgh. All of these great achievements of Scots through the past, and all the wealth that we have today in Scotland is as a direct consequence of the Union. This is the most amazing thing. The national newspaper's running a series at the moment about great Scottish infrastructure, and most of it's all built, well, all of it is all built apart from the castles that they're referring to, all the actual big infrastructure was all built from the time of the Union until before even devolution. And so all of that is a consequence. All the Scottish achievements and all the Scottish wealth that we have today is a direct consequence of the Union. Somebody yesterday on Twitter came at me with a big long list of how wealthy Scotland is, as if this was to prove that we can be independent. Well, I said, all of these wealthy things, they could well be right, but that's just a consequence of the Union. You do understand, if you're looking at it from that position, Scotland's wealth is a consequence of the Union. And they were like, oh, they don't want to. That's how you answer that. That's how you answer that, and they don't want to go there.
Yeah, I mean, comments like that just make me laugh. Like, as if it wasn't for, no offence, if it wasn't for Scotland, we'd all be sat here now, communicating with smoke signals still. Come on. Get a grip of your life, for God's sake.
Yeah, there's that, isn't there? Absolutely. There's that also. But some of the crazy things that the Scottish nationalists come out with on Twitter, and I find because sometimes it's worth engaging with them, because if only to really understand exactly where they're coming from. And some of them, there's the gaps unbridgeable. I was trying to explain to somebody yesterday about the British Parliament and how it's intended to represent everybody within the UK. And this person was, no, it's an English Parliament, and they saw the relationship as England basically in a master-slave relationship with the rest of the UK. And when you're faced with that, there's the gap there in understanding. The gap between the two different understandings of reality is so unbridgeable that you just have to say, well, sorry guys, but I'm out of this conversation. There's literally no point in me continuing here. And that's just is well worth being aware that there are people who will say that and will try to push that. And if they wrote that in a tweet, hundreds of people will retweet it. Yeah. And if you and I actually said, no, this is actually how it works here, we'll get maybe one retweet. So it's worth just knowing that that's out there, that kind of view is out there, and that the best that we can do is just know about it and attempt to address it through the mediums that we can, such as your program and through my program as well. How is your YouTube page coming on these days?
Yeah, it's good. It's going fine. We had a bit of difficulty with YouTube a while ago. I think they were trying to. I'm not quite PC enough for them, so I think they tried to hold it back a little bit. But it's continuing to grow now. It seems to have they seem to have lifted whatever bar they put on it, so it's growing well enough again now. But good. It's going fine, to be honest with you. It's
good. Yes, because I remember last time we spoke, I think you mentioned something about that. So no, that's good. That's good to hear. And just so folk know, you can be found on twitter.com/AKWriting88.
Yep.
And on youtube.com/that Preston Journalist, all one word. Good stuff. Yeah, any final comments or thoughts on what's going on these days, Ash?
Yeah, I know we've not really had time, but I'll bring up one thing that we did want to talk about. It's I want to bring up the Nigel Farage debanking thing at the moment. And
Absolutely.
Of course, all the people on the so-called left, if you will, who are laughing at Farage or laughing at, about, he reckons 1,000 bank accounts, if not more, are being cancelled every single day by these banks. And bear in mind, the NatWest Group is 40% owned by taxpayers. It's an absolute scandal. What the government should threaten to do is sell all their 40% share, and then NatWest will probably go bankrupt. And then they'd soon start behaving themselves, I think. But it just goes to show, these people want total and utter control over you. This is trying to take away cash as they're doing now, trying to put limits on people's accounts, what they can deposit, what they can withdraw. Means that every single transaction you ever make, everywhere you go, they will be able to see exactly where you've been and what you're doing. We are heading towards in my opinion, a Chinese social credit system in this country if we allow it to happen. And really, whether you're left, right, centre, what, even if you don't vote, you should really be behind Farage on this, because he's speaking for everybody, in my opinion. Because if it can happen to someone like him, it can happen to someone like you, it can happen to someone like me. And it's good. It's a good job that it did happen to Farage, because he's big enough to take the banks on, which, of course, at the moment he is doing. So I think that's a massive story at the minute that really isn't getting the traction it should by the mainstream media, because, of course, they all go along with it. They're all happy for this to happen.
That's absolutely true. And the point you made there about NatWest being 40% owned by the taxpayer is so true. Well, if that's the case, which it is, does the taxpayer get a say on this? Shouldn't like 2/5 of people who are weighing in on the board, shouldn't they be speaking for people like you and I, talking about that? So like, we're paying for it, but we've got no say in how it's run, which seems to be wrong.
And I wasn't asked if I wanted to bail the bank out either, by the way, just because they've been stupid and invested in the wrong things and then helped to crash the economy in 2008. Nobody asked me if I wanted to pay to bail out NatWest.
I know, and bailing out the woman who is in charge of Coutts, which is just a branch of NatWest. She's not even the leader of NatWest. She's
Dame Alison Rose.
Yeah, 5.25, £5.25 million a year. That was her wage.
Yeah.
Now I ask you, what kind of decisions do you make that makes that worth your while? I mean, there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so much work that any human being can do, and there's a limit to people's wisdom. I mean, what decision did she make, like, in her office that was worth 5.25 million? I mean, it's like, oh, we need a new photocopier, or, you know, could somebody buy 10 parcels of toner cartridge for the photocopier instead of 5, because that will save us £3 over the course of 6 months or something? And people are like, whoa, what a fantastic decision, that's worth 5.25 million to the company. There's just no way
she's getting that in
you're
severance
worth that.
pay, you know. She's getting that in severance pay as well when she leaves, despite the fact she's broken the cardinal rule in banking, which of course is security, GDPR and all that stuff. She's broken all that, and she's going to get over £5 million in severance pay. And the whole time she was in charge of this bank, it showed NatWest share prices, the NatWest group itself, since the 2008 financial crash to now. And it was a bar chart, and it just went like that. There was no big ups, nothing like that. It was just a flat line. It hasn't grown at all since 2008, and she's going to get over £5 million. 40% of that is taxpayer money, and she's going to get paid off in all that money. It's absolute shambles.
Absolute shambles. And the government is making the right kind of noises, but it's not coming out with the energy and emotion that it needs to be for this absolute scandal. And it never has, of course, when the banking debacle occurred again. David Cameron, if I recall him rightly, he simply just, he again didn't go after the bankers. Remember, what he should have done was put all these guys in court. Yeah. But of course, that was back when we thought governments were looking after our own interests, and in time we've become much more cynical about those sorts of things, and realised that in many ways they're just simply a management committee for the City of London financial services.
Yeah, they called it a global financial crash, of course, a global recession. But who calls that global recession? It was the banks. There's a fantastic, if anyone gets a chance to see it, I won't go on any longer, I know we're coming towards the end. A great show on Netflix if anyone gets a chance to watch it, and it's called The Inside Job, I think, and it's a documentary about how these banks, how Wall Street, etc., all colluded together and how they caused the 2008 financial crisis, and it's really worth a watch if you're interested in that sort of thing.
I've watched it, and I second your emotion there. I
really
definitely recommend watching The Inside Job. It really helps to it's a documentary. It's not a film as such, if it's the one I'm thinking about.
Yeah, so documentary.
Yeah, it does actually help you to understand what was going on. Good. I noticed a lady there who is subscribed to your channel.
Oh, thank you.
There we go. Scotland Scorpion now subscribed to Ash's YouTube channel at youtube.com/that Preston Journalist. Ash, it's the top of the hour. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Lots of stuff we wanted to talk about, but we didn't get the chance. But you know what? There'll definitely be another chance, hopefully in the not too distant future. You're one of our stalwarts here at A Force for Good, and we love the fact that you keep coming back on. So thank you very much for that. Okay, we'll say goodnight, and we'll see you in time.
Perfect. Right, thank you. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you soon.
Bye now. Fantastic. Ash, that Preston journalist. Thank you for sending in all the comments, folks. We didn't get a chance to put them all up there. But that's really good. Now I've got an apology to make. I forgot. Well, I didn't forget about the On This Day in British History, but I didn't time things appropriately in order to give some time for that. So we didn't have an On This Day in British History today, but we'll hopefully have one next time that we're here. So we are going to be back next week, and then the week after that we'll probably not be on, but next week we'll be on with a very good guest, hopefully with a lot to talk about. And thanks for your comments there. So folks, we will see you next week. It just remains for me to say God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King.